The medical bay's soft blue lighting cast ethereal shadows across the alien's iridescent scales as Lieutenant Jessica Miller carefully monitored her vital signs. According to the outpost's medical computer, an outdated Nexus 7 model, the visitor's biology shared surprising similarities with human physiology, despite her exotic appearance. Temperature rising to normal parameters, neural activity stabilizing. The computer announced in its monotone voice, "Caution, unknown biochemical compounds detected in bloodstream." Jess sighed, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. 2 years stationed at this forgotten outpost, filing routine reports nobody read. And now this. First contact with a Kaltorian, a species known only through classified alliance briefings and spacer legends. Lieutenant Miller, the computer interrupted. Security Protocol 17B requires immediate notification of Alliance Command regarding unauthorized alien presence. Override Protocol 17B. Authorization Miller J547. Jess replied automatically. Medical emergency takes precedence. The truth was more complicated. Alliance Command would dispatch a diplomatic vessel in about 3 weeks. Meanwhile, they'd order her to place the alien in cryostasis and avoid further contact. Standard procedure for an unpredictable human meeting an advanced species. Jess studied the alien's face. Elegant, with gem-like structures protruding from her temples in a pattern too precise to be natural. Her garments, though torn and stained, contained circuitry that occasionally pulsed with faint light. Most striking were her hands, 6-fingered with double-jointed thumbs, perfect for manipulation of complex instruments. The alien's eyes snapped open, vertical pupils dilating rapidly against violet irises. She bolted upright with impossible speed, backing against the wall in one fluid motion. Vex Taller na Shimera. The alien's voice resonated strangely, as though speaking through multiple vocal sources simultaneously. Jess raised her hand slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here." The alien's eyes darted around the medical bay, cataloging every detail. Her posture remained defensive, but something like recognition flickered across her features. Primitive medical facility. Human architecture. Nexus computing system. The alien spoke perfect English, though her accent carried musical undertones. "This outpost is not registered in Alliance databases. We prefer modest to primitive," Jess replied with a small smile. "I'm Lieutenant Jessica Miller, Earth Defense Force, currently assigned to monitoring Outpost Omega. I found your escape pod crashed on the moon below." The alien's posture shifted subtly, centuries of royal training asserting itself even in crisis. "I am Zera Vex, first daughter to Emperor Thornvex, sovereign of the Kaltorian Imperium." She paused, assessing Jess with newfound intensity. "You recognize my vessel as Kaltorian, yet you rendered aid. Why?" The question seemed genuinely perplexing to her. Jess shrugged. "You were injured. Where I come from, that's reason enough." Zara's brow furrowed, the gemstone structures at her temples pulsing with blue light. "Curious. Your neural patterns suggest sincerity rather than strategic calculation." She moved gracefully from the examination table, her movements betraying lingering pain despite her composure. Human compassion is considered an evolutionary inefficiency by Alliance consensus. "We're stubborn about our inefficiencies," Jess replied, offering a hydration pack. "Something tells me you didn't end up in that escape pod by accident." The princess accepted the water, analyzing it briefly before drinking. "My uncle, Grand Admiral Draz Vex, has orchestrated a coup against my father. I discovered evidence of illegal neural recalibration among the Imperial Guard." Her voice remained controlled, but her hands trembled slightly. "When I attempted to warn my father, my shuttle was attacked by vessels bearing Imperial markings, but operating outside authorized protocols." Jess frowned. "And you sent distress signals to Alliance representatives?" 17 distinct species, Zora confirmed, bitter amusement crossing her features. Each one calculated the diplomatic risk and determined non-intervention was the optimal response. Her eyes locked with Jess's. The Veldari ambassador cited a 97.3% probability that assisting me would trigger interstellar conflict. The Raxan Military Directorate claimed jurisdictional constraints. The Mithran Collective voted internally and declined involvement. But your pod's trajectory brought you here, Jess said quietly. About as far from diplomatic channels as possible. A small, sophisticated device on Zora's wrist suddenly pulsed with red light. Her expression hardened. That was a proximity alert. Vessels are approaching. Not Imperial design, but utilizing Kaltorian propulsion signatures. She turned to Jess with sudden urgency. You must understand. These are not official Imperial forces, but mercenaries empowered by my uncle. They operate outside our ethical constraints. Any human facility harboring me will be eliminated without diplomatic consideration. Jess moved to the monitoring station, activating the outpost's sensors. 3 unmarked vessels had entered orbit, their design incorporating elements from multiple species, a hallmark of high-end mercenary outfits. The computer calculated their weapons capacity at 7 times the outpost's defenses. How did they track you? Jess asked, already moving toward the equipment locker. Imperial biotechnology contains trace elements designed for recovery, Zora explained, her posture shifting from royal dignity to combat readiness. I removed the primary trackers, but secondary systems remain integrated with my neural structure. Jess pulled out a standard-issue sidearm and a survival pack. We need to move. Now. The princess regarded her with genuine confusion. Lieutenant Miller, escape is statistically impossible. Your logical course is to surrender me and claim ignorance of my identity. Jess checked her weapon and tossed Zora an environmental suit. I don't abandon people who need help, regardless of the statistics. She permitted herself a small smile. Besides, humans have a long history of beating impossible odds. The outpost's alert system activated, bathing the room in crimson morning lights as the first transport signatures appeared in the atmosphere. You have somewhere to go, Zora asked, quickly adapting to the environmental suit's unfamiliar design. As a matter of fact, Jess replied, leading them toward the maintenance shaft. I've been modifying a scout ship in my spare time. It's not pretty, but it's full of surprises. As they moved through the darkened corridors, Zara studied the human with growing fascination. Every calculation indicated their capture or death within the hour, yet Lieutenant Jessica Miller moved with determined confidence that defied logical assessment. Perhaps, Zara thought, the Alliance algorithms had underestimated humanity after all. The Firefly shuddered as Jess guided it through the asteroid field surrounding Outpost Omega. Despite its patchwork appearance, the scout ship responded to her touch with surprising agility, the result of countless off-duty hours spent recalibrating its systems. They're launching pursuit craft, Jess announced, eyes fixed on the sensor display. 4 interceptors, military grade. Definitely not standard mercenary equipment. Princess Zara studied the ship's interior with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Human engineering was chaotic by Kaltorian standards. Exposed wiring, manual backup systems, and modifications that prioritized function over elegance. She ran her 6-fingered hand along a panel where Jess had integrated salvaged Veldari crystal circuitry with Earth-manufactured components. This integration shouldn't work, Zara observed. The resonance patterns are incompatible. Jess flashed a quick smile while executing a tight maneuver between 2 asteroids. I rerouted the crystal matrix through a frequency modulator. It's not pretty, but it gives us an edge in sensor masking. The princess's gem-like temple structures pulsed with amber light, a sign of intense calculation. You've modified a standard harmonic stabilizer to accommodate quantum fluctuations. Unorthodox, but effective. That's humans for you. We make do. Jess activated a series of switches overhead. Hold tight. We're going to attempt something they won't expect. The Firefly's engines roared as Jess sent them directly toward the densest part of the asteroid field, a maneuver no flight computer would recommend. Behind them, Two of the pursuit craft hesitated while the others followed cautiously. Approaching vessels bear modified Kaltorian registry, Zara said, accessing the ship's communication array. Their energy signatures suggest neural-linked weaponry. These are Draz's elite hunters. Can you tell me more about your uncle? Jess asked, weaving through spinning rocks with instinctive precision. What exactly is he planning? Zara's expression darkened. The Kaltorian Imperium has maintained isolation for 3 centuries, developing technology independently from Alliance influence. While other species embraced predictive algorithms to guide their evolution, we focused on biological integration with technology. A proximity alert blared as energy weapons fire streaked past their port side. Jess rolled the ship, using a large asteroid as temporary cover. My uncle believes isolation has made us vulnerable, Zora continued. He plans to emerge onto the galactic stage, not as partners but conquerors. His neural recalibration program ensures absolute loyalty by overriding individualized thought patterns. Mind control, Jess translated grimly. And your father doesn't know. The Emperor believes Draz is developing defensive capabilities only. But I discovered prototypes designed for offensive deployment against specific species. Zara's voice wavered slightly. His first targets would be humans. Why us? We're hardly the most advanced species in the Alliance. Because your neural architecture is. Zora paused as another blast rocked the ship. Your minds resist standardization. While advanced species have evolved toward pattern consistency, humans maintain neural plasticity that defies prediction. The pursuing ships were closing distance rapidly. Jess's hands flew across the controls, rerouting power between systems with practiced efficiency. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us, Jess observed. They want you alive. Recalibration requires living neural tissue, Zora confirmed. My uncle needs me functional to access certain secured systems within the Imperial Palace. Jess nodded grimly. We need to disappear completely. Luckily, this ship has a few modifications the original manufacturers never imagined. She activated a concealed panel, revealing a jury-rigged system combining cooling technology with electromagnetic dampers. This is something I developed after studying Raxan cloaking principles. It won't make us invisible, but it will mask our heat signature and energy emissions. This technology shouldn't be available to humans, Zora said, surprised. It isn't. I pieced it together from theoretical papers and salvaged components. Jess grinned. Alliance species tend to underestimate what humans can reverse engineer. As the system engaged, the Firefly's lights dimmed to emergency levels. The constant hum of the engines quieted to a whisper. Temperature inside the cabin began dropping rapidly. Life support at minimal levels, Jess explained, her breath now visible in the chilled air. We'll drift with the asteroid field while appearing dormant to their sensors. Through the viewport, they watched as the pursuit craft scanned the area with increasingly powerful sensor suites. One passed within 50 meters of their position without detecting them. Impressive improvisation, Zara acknowledged, her royal composure briefly giving way to genuine admiration. Kaltorian tactical doctrine would never approve such an approach. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one, Jess replied, monitoring the pursuer's movements. We humans learned it the hard way. As they drifted in silence, Zara studied the lieutenant with new perspective. Why are you risking your life for me? Your alliance has clearly designated Kaltorian affairs as diplomatically hazardous. Jess considered the question carefully. When I joined Earth Defense, I took an oath to protect those who needed protection. That doesn't stop at human borders. Such thinking is considered dangerously unpredictable among advanced species. Maybe that's why they keep us at arm's length, Jess replied. Compassion doesn't always make logical sense, but it's what makes us human. A notification on the communications panel interrupted their conversation. Jess's expression tightened as she examined the incoming data. It's an all-frequencies broadcast from your uncle, she said quietly. He's declaring himself Imperial Regent, claiming your father has entered sacred meditation and is unfit to rule. He's offering a substantial reward for your return." Zora's composure cracked, her temple gems flashing crimson with emotional distress. "The purification ceremony has begun early. We have less time than I thought." Jess reached across the console, briefly touching the princess's arm in a gesture of solidarity that transcended species differences. "Then we'll need allies. I know a place. A trading outpost where even Kaltorians aren't the most unusual visitors. The mercenaries will be watching all registered ports," Zora warned. Jess's smile returned, determination replacing caution. "Who said anything about registered? Helios Station operates in the shadow of an electrical nebula. No official recognition, no alliance oversight, and most importantly, no questions asked." The pursuers were now moving toward the outer system, their search pattern expanding away from the asteroid field. Jess began carefully reactivating the Firefly systems. "We'll need to move quickly once we break cover," she explained. "The nebula's interference will help mask our approach, but it's still a risk." Princess Zora, heir to the most advanced isolated civilization in the galaxy, found herself placing her trust in a human using salvage technology and intuitive piloting. Against all algorithmic probability, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the coup began: hope. The methane geysers of Nix 7 stretched below them like a frozen battlefield, crystal formations catching the dim light of the distant sun. Jess guided the Firefly through the treacherous terrain, flying dangerously close to the surface where sensor readings became unreliable. "Two pursuit vessels still on our tail," Jess announced, her voice steady despite the strain evident in her posture. "Their guidance systems are more advanced, but they're following predictable interception vectors." Zora monitored the ship's makeshift tactical display, her royal training evident in her methodical assessment. "Their formation indicates Hexium tactical doctrine, developed for maximum coverage with minimal communication requirements." "Then they're expecting us to follow a logical escape route," Jess replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "Time to disappoint them." Without warning, she cut the main engines and activated maneuvering thrusters only, sending the Firefly into a controlled dive toward the largest geyser field. Warning systems blared throughout the cabin. "What are you doing?" Zora demanded, temple gems flashing with alarm. "These formations periodically erupt with liquid methane at temperatures approaching absolute zero. Contact would shatter our hull instantly." "Exactly," Jess confirmed, fingers dancing across the manual controls. "But the heat from our pursuers' more powerful engines will trigger those eruptions prematurely." Understanding dawned in Zora's expression. "You're creating a navigational hazard they can't anticipate." The princess watched in fascination as Jess piloted with an intuitive style that defied the mathematical precision of Kaltorian flight training. Where Kaltorian pilots followed optimized trajectories calculated to 15 decimal places, this human seemed to feel the ship's movement, adjusting on instinct rather than computation. "Proximity alert," the ship's computer warned. "Methane pressure exceeding safety parameters." "I see it," Jess muttered, pulling the ship into a tight spiral between crystalline formations. "Zora, reroute auxiliary power to the ventral shields." The princess moved to the engineering station, quickly deciphering the human interface. "Your shield configuration is unbalanced. The power distribution is intentionally asymmetric." Jess finished her sentence. "Trust me." Behind them, the pursuing vessels maintained their textbook-perfect formation, closing the distance with inexorable precision. Their superior engines pushed them faster, their trajectories calculated to intersect with the Firefly in approximately 40 seconds. Jess smiled. "Perfect." She abruptly reversed thrusters and cut a sharp turn directly toward the largest geyser formation, a maneuver that caused the artificial gravity to fluctuate wildly. Warning lights illuminated the cabin as structural integrity sensors registered dangerous stress levels. "Collision imminent," the computer announced dispassionately. "Lieutenant Miller," Zora exclaimed, bracing against the console. Their tactical computers will recognize this as suicide. They'll simply wait for us to. The geyser field beneath them suddenly illuminated with brilliant blue light as the heat from the pursuing vessel's engines interacted with the unstable methane pockets. Massive eruption columns burst skyward, creating a chaotic debris field of ice crystals and frozen gas. Jess pulled back hard on the controls, skimming the Firefly mere meters above the erupting surface. The uneven shield distribution she configured created a wedge effect, deflecting the superchilled particles away from their most vulnerable systems. Behind them, the mercenary ships reacted a crucial half-second too late. Their automated defense systems, designed for conventional threats, failed to properly categorize the erupting geysers. One vessel took a direct hit from an ice geyser, spinning out of control as its port engine froze and shattered. The second attempted evasive maneuvers but became trapped in a cascade of secondary eruptions. "Unbelievable," Zara whispered, watching the tactical display as both pursuing ships disappeared beneath clouds of frozen methane. Their systems should have calculated the thermal reaction potential. "That's the difference," Jess explained, navigating through the aftermath of the eruption field. Their computers calculated probabilities based on established parameters. They didn't imagine someone would intentionally fly into a death trap. The Firefly emerged from the geyser field, its hull coated with a thin layer of frost but systems intact. Jess plotted a course away from the moon, pushing the engines to full power now that stealth was no longer their priority. "We've bought ourselves some time," she said, finally allowing herself to relax slightly. "Those ships will require significant repairs, if they survive at all." Zara studied the human with newfound respect. "Your approach defies conventional tactical wisdom. No Kaltorian pilot would have attempted such a maneuver." "That's our advantage," Jess replied. "Your uncle expects you to be recovered by ships following standard operating procedures. He's not prepared for human unpredictability." A warning tone from the navigation console interrupted their moment of triumph. The ship's long-range sensors detected additional vessels entering the system, larger and more heavily armed than the pursuit craft they'd just evaded. "Draz is escalating," Zora observed grimly. "Those are Shadowhawk-class interceptors, reserved for high-priority Imperial operations." Jess examined the approaching signatures with a practiced eye. "We can't outrun those, and another trick like the geysers won't work twice." She considered their options, weighing risks against dwindling possibilities. "There's only one place we might stand a chance: the Helios Nebula." Zora's expression revealed her shock. The electromagnetic interference would render most navigation systems useless. "Exactly," Jess nodded, "which is why Helios Station was built inside it. No official oversight, no standard approach vectors. And most importantly, the nebula's radiation scrambles neural trackers." "You would navigate the nebula manually?" Zara asked incredulously. Jess programmed the coordinates, determination evident in her movements. "It's been done before. Not often. And not without risk, but possible." As the Firefly accelerated toward the distant nebula, its swirling gases visible even from this distance, Zara recognized the human quality she'd been taught was their greatest weakness: hope in the face of impossible odds. "Lieutenant Miller," she said quietly, "in all my diplomatic training, humans were categorized as an unpredictable variable, a species whose actions couldn't be reliably anticipated." Jess glanced over with a tired smile. "Let me guess. That made us dangerous." "It made you dismissed," Zara corrected. "Advanced species prefer reliable patterns, but I'm beginning to understand that unpredictability might be your greatest strength." The nebula grew larger in their viewport, its chaotic energies both sanctuary and in peril. As the pursuing ships closed the distance, Jess prepared to attempt what Kaltorian tactical manuals would consider mathematically impossible. After all, impossible odds were humanity's specialty. Helios Station hung suspended within the nebula's swirling gases, a massive structure cobbled together from decommissioned vessels, salvaged habitation modules, and improvised connecting tunnels. Unlike the elegant symmetry of Alliance architecture, the station grew organically, each addition responding to immediate need rather than long-term planning. Jess guided the Firefly through the docking procedure, navigating past vessels of every conceivable design. The nebula's electromagnetic interference created a natural sanctuary for those seeking to avoid official scrutiny: smugglers, political refugees, disgraced scientists, and species fleeing conflicts in their home systems. "Impressive," Zara murmured, observing the bustling activity visible through viewports as they passed. No centralized authority structure, yet functional cooperation persists. "Necessity breeds collaboration," Jess explained. "Station law is simple. Don't jeopardize life support, settle disputes without structural damage, and contribute something useful." Their assigned docking port connected to what appeared to be a repurposed cargo module, now serving as an arrival checkpoint. As the airlock cycled, Jess handed Zora a worn jacket with a high collar. "Keep your temple gems covered," she advised. "Kaltorians are rare here, but not unheard of. Better to avoid unnecessary attention." Zara accepted the garment, studying its patched fabric with scientific curiosity rather than royal disdain. The material contains trace elements of Velderi silk fibers, unusual in human clothing. "Salvaged from a diplomatic transport that got caught in a solar flare," Jess replied with a shrug. "Nothing goes to waste out here." The airlock opened to reveal a corridor humming with activity. Species from across the galaxy moved purposefully, engaged in commerce, negotiation, and information exchange. Unlike the rigidly segregated interactions of official Alliance spaces, boundaries here blurred through necessity and mutual advantage. "Stay close," Jess instructed, navigating the crowded pathway with practiced ease. "We're heading to the exchange, central hub for information and meetings." As they moved deeper into the station, Zara observed the improvised infrastructure with growing fascination. Environmental systems combine technologies from multiple species, creating solutions that would horrify Alliance engineers while functioning with surprising efficiency. These modifications violate 17 different Alliance safety protocols, the princess noted quietly. "And yet the station has survived for 23 years, Jess countered. Sometimes the Alliance forgets that different doesn't mean wrong. They entered a vast circular chamber where dozens of species gathered around trading posts, information terminals, and meeting areas. Transparent ceiling panels revealed the nebula's swirling colors overhead, bathing the space in shifting purple and blue light. "Jessica Miller," a gravelly voice called out. A reptilian figure with scarred scales and cybernetic enhancements approached, mandibles clicking with what passed for a smile among the skrill. "3 cycles since your last visit. Rumor claimed enforcement finally caught you." "Rumors of my capture are greatly exaggerated, Drax," Jess replied with easy familiarity. "How's business?" "Profitable but complicated," the skrill trader answered, multifaceted eyes shifting to examine Zara with undisguised curiosity. "Your companion bears interesting genetic markers. Isolated evolution branch, sophisticated biotech integration." Jess stepped smoothly between them. "My friend is from the outer colonies. We're looking for Captain Reeves. Heard he might be docked here." Drax's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused. "The Starhawk arrived yesterday. Reeves seeks specialized parts in the engineering sector." The trader leaned closer. "He also seeks information about Kaltorian fleet movements." Curious coincidence. Zara tensed almost imperceptibly, but maintained her composure with centuries of royal training. "Thanks, Drax," Jess replied casually. "I owe you one. Your modified shield harmonics design cleared my debt 3 times over." The trader clicked dismissively. "But caution advised. Alliance representatives occupy level 7. Unusual gathering of species typically disinterested in frontier commerce." As they moved away, Zara whispered, "Your trader friend recognized my genetic markers." Drax was a xenobiologist before the Skrill purification campaign, Jess explained. "He won't report us. Alliance species massacred his people during their evolutionary correction program." The princess processed this information silently, another piece contradicting her formal education about Alliance benevolence. They made their way toward the engineering sector, passing through increasingly industrial surroundings. Massive power conduits ran alongside walkways, and the air carried the scent of ozone and machine oil. There, Jess pointed toward a weathered vessel docked at a maintenance bay. Despite its battle-scarred exterior, the ship's systems hummed with well-maintained efficiency. The Starhawk. As they approached, a tall figure emerged from beneath an access panel, human, with prematurely silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of formal military training gone deliberately casual. Lieutenant Miller, the man greeted her, wiping grease from calloused hands, still flying that modified death rat. I see. Captain Reeves, Jess replied with a hint of a smile. Still pretending you don't miss Alliance protocols. Every damn day. He admitted with a chuckle that faded as he noticed Zora. His expression shifted to professional assessment. Your companion isn't from the outer colonies, regardless of what you told the Skrill trader. Zara removed her hood, revealing her temple gems. You have exceptional observational skills, Captain. Reeves straightened, recognition evident in his expression. Princess Zeravex, your uncle has placed an impressive bounty on your safe return. My safe return would ensure my father's permanent removal from power, Zara replied evenly. A tense silence followed, broken by the station's ambient machinery. Jess watched her former commander carefully, recognizing the calculation behind his neutral expression. I need to know where you stand, Marcus, she said quietly. Before he could answer, alarms blared throughout the sector. Emergency bulkheads began closing automatically as the station's AI announced. Security alert. Unauthorized weapons discharge detected in Central Exchange. All residents implement lockdown protocols. Reeves moved with decisive efficiency, gesturing toward his ship. Inside. Now. The Starhawk has independent environmental seals. As they hurried aboard, Jess accessed a station security feed on her portable terminal. The display showed armored figures moving with military precision through the exchange. Bounty hunters wearing modified combat suits with distinctive Kaltorian design elements. They found us, Zara stated, her royal composure momentarily faltering. Reeves studied the security feed, professional assessment overriding any lingering reservations. Those aren't standard mercenaries. Their movement patterns indicate specialized training. Neural-linked combat systems. My uncle's elite hunters, Zora confirmed. The captain made his decision, activating the ship's internal systems with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Miller, secure the main hatch. Princess, I'll need everything you know about their tactical capabilities. Jess paused at the hatchway. You're helping us. I've spent 5 years watching the Alliance compromise its principles for political expediency, Reeves replied, his expression hardening. I won't stand by while they ignore another coup, just because it's diplomatically convenient. As the bounty hunters methodically worked their way toward the engineering sector, Captain Reeves summoned his crew. A diverse collection of species united by their disillusionment with Alliance politics. The coming confrontation would test not just their combat skills, but their commitment to justice beyond borders. For Princess Zora, raised in isolation and trained to view non-Kaltorians with skepticism, witnessing humans risk their lives for principles rather than advantage challenged everything she'd been taught about this unpredictable species. Perhaps unpredictability wasn't a weakness after all, but evolution's most sophisticated adaptation. The Kaltorian data fortress of Cepheus Prime loomed before them through the viewport, a massive structure suspended above the planet's caustic sea on gravitational tethers. Unlike the organic curves of traditional Kaltorian architecture, the fortress displayed aggressive angularity, its surface studded with sensor arrays and defense turrets. Impressive, Captain Reeves murmured, studying the tactical display. No visible approach vectors that wouldn't trigger automated defense systems. The crew of the Starhawk gathered in the command center, a diverse collection of species united by their disillusionment with Alliance politics. Lieutenant Hayes, a former Velderi diplomatic attaché, whose crystalline features reflected the blue lighting, manipulated a holographic representation of the fortress. "Standard infiltration protocols are ineffective," Hayes stated, his voice carrying the mathematical precision characteristic of his species. "The security algorithms incorporate cascading authentication barriers with quantum encryption." "What about a direct approach?" suggested Commander Cora, a Raxan tactical officer whose militaristic species valued straightforward solutions. "A focused assault on the southern quadrant cold would result in our immediate destruction," Zara interrupted, her royal training evident in her tone. "The fortress employs phase-shifted shield harmonics. Conventional weapons cannot penetrate them." Frustration built as each suggestion met with insurmountable obstacles. The alien crew members proposed increasingly complex technical solutions, each requiring specialized equipment or weeks of preparation they didn't have. Jess had remained silent, studying not the holographic display, but a secondary screen showing supply manifests and maintenance schedules. Her expression shifted suddenly. "We're overthinking this," she announced, interrupting a detailed proposal from Hayes involving custom-designed circuit interceptors. "Look at the maintenance schedule. The atmospheric regulators are due for calibration within the next 6 hours." "Irrelevant," Hayes dismissed. "Internal maintenance follows automated protocols requiring biological verification from authorized personnel." "Exactly," Jess replied with growing excitement. "And who performs the verification?" She magnified a section of the manifest showing contractor assignments. "Navarro Engineering, a civilian company that services environmental systems throughout this sector. They're not part of the military command structure." Reeves caught her meaning immediately. Contractor credentials would bypass military security protocols. "We'd still need authentic identification signatures," Cora objected. "Biometric patterns are impossible to falsify at this security level." Jess turned to Drax, the Skrill trader who had joined their mission after bounty hunters destroyed his shop on Helios Station. "Didn't you mention acquiring salvaged biometric modules from a decommissioned Navarro transport?" The reptilian merchant's mandibles clicked with appreciation. "Functional identity transponders. 3 complete sets, recovered before Alliance salvage teams." His compound eyes shifted toward Zara. "But Kaltorian biological scanners will detect species variants unless masked." Zara considered this challenge. "Temple gems pulsing with calculations. Kaltorian scanners detect cellular resonance patterns, not merely physical characteristics." However, she turned to the ship's medical officer, a Mithran researcher named Selith, whose species specialized in biochemical sciences. "Is it possible to temporarily alter our cellular resonance signatures?" she asked. Selith's multiple eyes blinked in sequential thought. "Theoretically, a compound of modified receptor blockers could suppress distinctive patterns for approximately 4 hours before cellular rejection begins." Captain Reeves surveyed his unlikely crew. "So our plan is to impersonate maintenance contractors, enter through service access points, and locate the data core while experiencing potentially dangerous biochemical modifications." "That summarizes it accurately," Hayes confirmed with Velderi precision. Reeves smiled grimly. "Sounds exactly like the sort of plan Alliance tactical advisors would reject as excessively unpredictable." 6 hours later, Jess found herself in a maintenance transport approaching the fortress's service dock. Beside her sat Zara and Reeves, all 3 wearing the unremarkable gray uniforms of Navarro Engineering. The biochemical suppressant Selith had synthesized left a metallic taste in Jess's mouth and a slight buzzing sensation beneath her skin. "Remember," Zara whispered as they approached the first security checkpoint, "maintenance personnel are expected to be efficient but unexceptional. Do not demonstrate advanced knowledge or unusual problem-solving." Jess nodded slightly. "Be boring." "Got it." The docking procedure completed with mechanical precision. A robotic interface extended from the security portal, scanning their transponders and cellular patterns with pulsing blue light. Jess felt her heart hammering against her ribs as the scanner lingered on her face. After an agonizing moment, The portal arised open. Navarro personnel confirmed. Proceed to Environmental Control Section 47B. Deviation from assigned route will trigger security response. They entered a stark white corridor illuminated by recessed lighting. Unlike the chaotic vibrancy of Helios Station, the fortress interior maintained oppressive sterility, a physical manifestation of rigid Kaltorian military doctrine. The central data core is 3 levels below us, Zara murmured, maintaining the appearance of reviewing work orders on her tablet. We'll need to access the maintenance shaft at Junction 12 to bypass primary security zones. They proceeded through a series of checkpoints, each successfully navigated through the combination of stolen credentials and biochemical masking. The fortress's vast interior revealed itself as a labyrinth of interconnected systems, each monitored by both automated protocols and occasional Kaltorian security officers whose temple gems glowed with the distinctive red pattern of military designation. At Junction 12, Reeves casually positioned himself to block surveillance coverage, while Jess accessed the maintenance shaft. The panel required an authorization code that cycled every 30 seconds. The algorithm follows standard Kaltorian military progression, Zara whispered, her fingers hovering above the keypad. But something's wrong. This isn't the expected pattern. Jess studied the changing symbols, recognizing something in their sequence. It's a modified version of the standard progression. Look at the secondary symbols. They are shifted based on positional values rather than numerical ones. Without conscious calculation, Jess input a sequence that incorporated both the expected progression and the positional variance. The panel slid open silently. Zara stared at her. How did you recognize that pattern shift? It defies standard analysis. It reminded me of an old Earth game called chess, Jess explained as they slipped into the maintenance shaft. The pieces move in set patterns, but strategy comes from recognizing alternative applications of those patterns. They descended through the shaft, bypassing primary security corridors and approaching the heavily guarded data core. According to their intelligence, the core contained the complete timeline of Draz's coup, including the Emperor's purification ceremony scheduled to permanently remove him from power. As they reached the final access point, a shimmering field of energy blocked their path. Reeves attempted to bypass it using a modified access tool, but the barrier remained intact. Unexpected security measure, he muttered. We need a different approach. Before they could retreat, the fortress's AI detected the unauthorized access attempt. Alarm klaxons blared throughout the complex, and the shaft illuminated with pulsing red warning lights. Security breach detected. Initiating containment protocols. Stasis fields activated throughout the shaft, designed to immobilize intruders until security forces arrived. Reeves and Zara froze in place, caught in the energy field's paralyzing effect. But Jess remained mobile, the field seemingly having no effect on her. Lieutenant Miller, Zara managed through immobilized lips. How are you unaffected? I don't know, Jess replied, examining the stasis projectors. The field must be calibrated for standard neural patterns. In that crucial moment, Zara understood. Human neural architecture, with its unpredictable pathways and unique connectivity, had rendered Jess resistant to technology designed to immobilize more predictable species. The data core, Zara urged. You must continue alone. Jess hesitated only briefly before nodding with determination. Whatever quirk of human evolution had spared her from the stasis field might be their only chance to prevent an interstellar war. As security forces converged on their position, Lieutenant Jessica Miller, the unpredictable variable in a precisely calculated system, ventured alone toward the heart of the Kaltorian fortress. The Starhawk's command center hummed with tension as the crew gathered around the holographic display. Jess stood at its center, her expression grim as the stolen data files projected their contents into the air around them. Complex Kaltorian script scrolled alongside technical schematics and biological models that shifted between humanoid and Kaltorian forms. The translation algorithm is processing the final segments, Hayes announced, his crystalline features catching the light as he manipulated the controls. Approximately 97.3% complete. Captain Reeves studied the schematics with growing concern. Their escape from the data fortress had been nothing short of miraculous. Jess carrying an incapacitated Zora through maintenance ducts, while the princess fought through the effects of the stasis field. The acidic sea beneath the fortress had nearly claimed them before the Starhawk's emergency extraction. These weapon designs, Reeves noted, focusing on a particular schematic. They incorporate neural interface technology that bypasses standard safety protocols. Zara nodded, her temple gems pulsing with distress as she recognized components. My uncle has been conducting forbidden research, combining culture and biotechnology with, she hesitated, turning to Jess, with human neural architecture. The room fell silent as implications settled over the gathered crew. Seleth, the Mithran medical officer, extended multiple appendages to manipulate the biological models. Fascinating and disturbing, the alien physician observed. These designs exploit the unpredictable pathways of human neural networks to create weapons that evolve beyond their programming parameters. Weapons that can think creatively, Jess translated, horror evident in her voice. That can adapt and improvise like humans do. Hayes manipulated another section of data, revealing strategic deployment plans across key sectors of Alliance space. Admiral Draz plans simultaneous strikes against 17 critical Alliance infrastructure nodes. The projected casualty estimates exceed 8 billion sentient beings. But why? Commander Cora demanded, her Raxan military training evident in her rigid posture. The Alliance has maintained non-aggression protocols with the Kaltorian Empire for centuries. Because the algorithms said we would fail, Zara answered quietly. She accessed a hidden section of the data, revealing ancient records that predated the formal establishment of the Galactic Alliance. A complex mathematical model expanded before them, showing evolutionary projections for thousands of species across hundreds of millennia. The foundational assessment, Hayes whispered, recognition flickering across his features. I thought it was merely theoretical. It's very real, Zora confirmed. When the earliest interstellar civilizations began encountering one another, they developed this model to predict which species would achieve long-term stability. The algorithm became the hidden foundation of Alliance membership evaluation. The projection highlighted humanity's developmental path with a glaring red indicator. According to the assessment, human unpredictability and emotional decision-making represents an evolutionary dead end. Zora continued. The model predicts human extinction within 300 years, with a 98.7% probability of self-destruction through technological misapplication. Jess stared at the projection, a cold realization settling in her stomach. So the Alliance has been, what? Containing us, keeping us marginalized while pretending to welcome us. Precisely, Hayes confirmed, his Velderi honesty overriding diplomatic sensitivity. Human representatives are systematically excluded from high-level decision-making, while being granted symbolic positions that create the illusion of inclusion. The assessment recommended gradual human integration only in controlled environments, Zara added. Advanced species have been quietly limiting human access to certain technologies, while simultaneously exploiting your creative problem-solving for their benefit. Commander Cora, despite her Raxan heritage, appeared troubled. The foundational assessment has guided Alliance species development for millennia. Its predictions have proven 99.4% accurate across evolutionary timescales. And yet, Captain Reeves interjected, it failed to predict that humans would discover this manipulation. It failed to account for human determination when faced with injustice. Drax, who had remained silent, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Algorithm omitted crucial variable. Humans stubbornly reject predetermined outcomes, statistical anomalies among sentient species. Jess processed this revelation, the understanding that humanity's position in galactic society had been built on a foundation of deception. All their struggles for recognition, their efforts to prove themselves worthy of equal standing, had been performed for an audience that had predetermined their failure. "Your father knew," she said suddenly, turning to Zora. "That's why the Kaltorian Empire maintained isolation. He rejected the assessment's conclusion." Zora's temple gems flickered with emotional resonance rarely displayed by her species. "My father believed the assessment fundamentally misunderstood the value of unpredictability in evolution. He maintained that creative adaptation, even when inefficient by conventional metrics, represented evolution's most sophisticated mechanism." While Admiral Draz, Reeves continued, saw an opportunity to weaponize the very quality the Alliance fears. The final segments of the stolen data completed translation, revealing Admiral Draz's ultimate plan. By combining Kaltorian biotechnology with human neural patterns, he intended to create weapons beyond the Alliance's ability to counter. Systems that could evolve tactics in real time, bypassing the predictive algorithms that had maintained galactic security for millennia. "The coup is scheduled to conclude in less than 48 hours, Hayes announced, reviewing the timeline. "The Emperor will be permanently removed from power, and Admiral Draz will deploy the first generation of hybrid weapons against key Alliance targets." Zora's composure faltered momentarily. "My father entered purification meditation believing it was a traditional ceremony of renewal. Instead, Draz is using ancient neural recalibration technology to permanently subjugate his consciousness." The command center fell silent as the magnitude of the crisis settled over them. Without intervention, billions would die in a war that would reshape galactic civilization, all because advanced species couldn't accept the unpredictable nature of human evolution. "There's something else," Jess said quietly, focusing on a section of data they had initially overlooked. "These neural patterns used in the weapons, they weren't taken from random humans." She magnified the genetic sequence, revealing a profile that matched her own with 99.8% accuracy. "They're mine. From my time in the Alliance Military Aptitude Assessment Program." Her voice hardened with determination. "Which means I might be the key to stopping them." As the Starhawk plotted its desperate course toward the Kaltorian homeworld, Lieutenant Jessica Miller confronted a terrible irony. The very unpredictability that had caused advanced species to dismiss humanity might be the galaxy's only hope for salvation. The sacred grounds of the Imperial Palace stretched before them, a breathtaking complex of crystalline spires and living architecture that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Unlike the stark militarism of the Data Fortress, the palace embodied Kaltorian cultural achievement. Structures that grew rather than were built, technology seamlessly integrated with biology. Jess, Zora, and Captain Reeves crouched within the ancient catacombs beneath the palace grounds. These forgotten tunnels predated Kaltorian technological ascension, remnants from when the species still relied on physical transportation rather than matter transfer. "The purification chamber lies at the heart of the Imperial Sanctuary," Zora whispered, consulting a three-dimensional map projected from her temple gems. "My father will be surrounded by the Ancestral Guard, genetically engineered warriors with absolute loyalty programming." "Loyalty to the Emperor," Jess clarified, "or to whoever controls the Ancestral Guard's neural network." "Perceptive question," Zora acknowledged grimly. "The Guard's primary directive is protection of Kaltorian genetic continuity as embodied by the Emperor. But Draz has introduced subtle recalibrations to their loyalty parameters." Captain Reeves checked their makeshift chronosynchronizer. "The ceremony reaches its critical phase in 37 minutes. Once complete, the Emperor's consciousness will be permanently subordinated to Draz's control imperatives." Their infiltration had required combining ancient knowledge with improvised solutions. While the palace's advanced security systems monitored all conventional approaches, the ceremonial attendance of thousands of pilgrims had created precisely the cover they needed, a chaotic influx of biological signatures that overwhelmed pattern recognition algorithms. "The catacombs connect to the sanctuary through ceremonial water channels," Zora explained, leading them through passages whose walls bore inscriptions from a more primitive era of Kaltorian civilization. My ancestors believed purifying water should flow from the planet's depths to cleanse the Emperor during renewal ceremonies. As they navigated the forgotten passages, they encountered challenges unanticipated by modern security systems, ancient mechanical traps designed millennia ago and forgotten by a civilization that had evolved beyond physical barriers. Jess's intuitive problem-solving proved invaluable against these primitive but deadly mechanisms. Fascinating design, she noted, examining a pressure-sensitive floor trigger. The mechanism relies on weight distribution rather than technological detection. No wonder it remains functional after centuries. My people's obsession with advancement occasionally blinds us to simpler solutions, Zara admitted, watching as Jess bypassed the ancient trap using counterweights fashioned from their equipment. The passage gradually transformed from rough-hewn stone to polished crystal, embedded with dormant circuitry. The transition zone between ancient construction and modern Kaltorian architecture. Distant harmonics reverberated through the structure, the ceremonial music accompanying the Emperor's purification. "We're directly beneath the sacred pool," Zara whispered, placing her palm against a section of wall that responded to her royal genetic signature. A seam appeared in the seemingly solid surface, revealing a maintenance access point designed for the ceremonial guardians who once tended the sacred waters. They emerged into a shadowed alcove overlooking a vast chamber dominated by a circular pool of luminescent liquid. Suspended above it in a field of energy, Emperor Thornvex floated in meditative position, his expression peaceful despite the neural recalibration underway. Surrounding him stood 12 members of the Ancestral Guard, their ceremonial armor incorporating living components that pulsed in synchronization with the Emperor's heartbeat. Admiral Draz observed from a control platform, his military uniform augmented with components that marked his illegitimate assumption of royal authority. Behind him, technicians monitored displays showing the progressive subjugation of the Emperor's neural pathways. "We're too late to prevent the primary recalibration sequence," Zara whispered, anguish evident in her voice. "The loyalty imprinting has already begun." Captain Reeves surveyed the chamber, military training assessing tactical options. Direct confrontation is suicide. The Ancestral Guard would eliminate us before we reached the control platform. Jess studied the scene, her mind working in the intuitive manner that had consistently defied predictive algorithms. The conventional approach, disabling the control systems through force, would fail against such overwhelming opposition. But perhaps there was another way. "The ceremony requires witnesses," she observed quietly. "Cultural validation of the transition." Zara nodded. "The assembled nobles and representatives must acknowledge the Emperor's renewal for it to hold legitimacy under ancient law." "Then we don't need to stop the ceremony," Jess realized. "We need to reveal its true nature to the witnesses." Understanding dawned in Zora's expression. The ceremonial waters, they amplify neural patterns to create the shared meditative state. If we could introduce counter-harmonics, we could break through the controlled narrative. Jess finished. "Show everyone what's really happening." Captain Reeves looked skeptical. "How do we access the ceremonial waters without being detected?" Jess indicated the maintenance tunnels that fed the sacred pool, the same way the ancient guardians did, through the purification channels. As Draz began the formal address to the assembled witnesses, Jess slipped into the narrow maintenance tunnel that connected to the sacred pool's filtration system. The liquid glowed with bioluminescent organisms engineered to respond to neural patterns, technology disguised as tradition, science presented as mysticism. Reaching the filtration junction, Jess encountered an unexpected obstacle, a modern security system integrated with the ancient infrastructure. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. Without Kaltorian genetic authorization or advanced technical knowledge, the system appeared impenetrable. Then she remembered something from the data they'd stolen. Her own neural patterns had been studied extensively by Kaltorian scientists. The security system was designed to recognize intentional infiltration attempts based on calculated approaches. But what about an approach based on human intuition rather than calculation? Jess closed her eyes, remembering childhood lessons about water flow and pressure. She identified auxiliary valves designed for emergency purging and manipulated them in sequence, not following technical protocols but basic principles of fluid dynamics that predated advanced technology. The system responded, interpreting her actions as maintenance protocols rather than infiltration attempts. Access granted not through deception, but through thinking in ways the system's designers hadn't anticipated. As Admiral Draz reached the ceremonial climax, Jess introduced the counter-harmonics Zora had hurriedly prepared, neural patterns designed to disrupt the controlled narrative without harming the participants. The luminescent waters briefly darkened before erupting with new patterns that spread throughout the chamber. The assembled witnesses gasped collectively as the ceremonial projection shifted, revealing not the traditional renewal imagery, but the actual neural recalibration underway. The Emperor's consciousness being systematically subjugated through forbidden technology. Admiral Draz's composure cracked as he realized what was happening. Security breach. The ceremony is under attack by Alliance infiltrators. The Ancestral Guard, programmed to protect Kaltorian continuity above all else, hesitated, their genetic predisposition toward protecting authentic authority conflicting with their recent programming. In that crucial moment of confusion, Zara stepped forward onto the ceremonial platform, her royal presence commanding attention. "Behold the truth," she proclaimed, her voice carrying the genetic authority of the royal bloodline. Not renewal but usurpation. Not tradition but treachery. The Emperor's eyes flickered open, his consciousness fighting through layers of imposed control as the counter-harmonics disrupted Draz's carefully constructed neural pathways. Recognition dawned in his expression as he beheld his daughter. "Zara," he managed, his voice weak but his will reasserting itself. "What has been done?" In that moment of truth, Lieutenant Jessica Miller, a human deemed unpredictable and dangerous by the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, had accomplished what countless algorithmic projections had declared impossible. She had given a subjugated emperor the chance to reclaim his mind through the power of human unpredictability. The Imperial Palace erupted into chaos as awareness cascaded through the assembled witnesses. Nobles with temple gems flickering in confusion, military officers frozen in uncertainty, and diplomatic representatives backing away from the unfolding conflict. Admiral Draz's carefully orchestrated coup fractured before their eyes, but the Admiral himself was far from defeated. "Execute contingency protocol," Draz commanded, activating controls embedded in his ceremonial gauntlets. Neural defense pattern Epsilon. Throughout the palace, Kaltorians loyal to Draz suddenly stiffened as hidden neural implants activated. Their eyes glazed over as autonomous combat programming overrode conscious control. The weapons Jess had discovered in the data files were not merely theoretical, they had already been deployed within living subjects. The neural templates, Zora gasped in horror. He's activated the hybrid weapons. The controlled Kaltorians moved with unnatural coordination, their movements incorporating unpredictable patterns based on the stolen human neural architecture. Traditional Kaltorian combat relied on mathematical precision and calculated efficiency, but these soldiers moved with human-like adaptability while maintaining Kaltorian strength and speed. "Get the Emperor to safety," Captain Reeves shouted, drawing his weapon as the first wave of controlled soldiers advanced toward the ceremonial platform. Jess rushed to the Emperor, who struggled to stand after being partially freed from neural recalibration. "Your Majesty, we need to move now." The Emperor's temple gems pulsed weakly as he fought through lingering control imperatives. "The ancestral chamber," he managed, his voice strengthening with each word. "Sacred protocols cannot be overridden there." As they retreated toward the palace's inner sanctum, the controlled soldiers pursued with terrifying efficiency. Unlike traditional combat units whose tactics could be predicted and countered, these hybrid controlled troops adapted in real time, adjusting to resistance with creative problem-solving that mirrored human thinking. "They're using my neural patterns," Jess realized with horror as she observed their movements. The way they adapt, the unpredictable approaches. It's based on how I think. The knowledge should have been demoralizing, but instead, Jess felt a strange certainty forming. If the weapons were based on her neural architecture, perhaps she could anticipate their adaptations in ways no one else could. This way, she called, making a sudden directional change that contradicted logical escape routes. The pursuing soldiers hesitated fractionally, their programming momentarily confused by behavior that matched their own underlying patterns. That momentary hesitation allowed their group to reach the ancestral memory chamber, a vast circular hall where holographic records of Kaltorian evolution swirled in mesmerizing patterns. The walls pulsed with living circuitry that connected to the planet's biosphere itself. The chamber recognizes genetic authority, the Emperor explained, his strength returning as distance from the ceremonial pool weakened Draz's influence. Only those of royal lineage may command here. As if responding to his words, the chamber's entrance sealed behind them, holographic barriers strengthening the physical doors. But their sanctuary would be temporary. Already, sounds of neural-enhanced soldiers attempting to breach the barriers echoed through the chamber. Admiral Draz's voice projected through the palace communication system, addressing not just them, but the entire Kaltorian homeworld. Citizens of the Empire, terrorist infiltrators have attacked our sacred renewal ceremony. The princess has been corrupted by human influence, threatening our genetic purity. Screens throughout the chamber displayed Draz approaching the ancestral chamber, surrounded by elite guards and carrying a device Jess recognized from the stolen files, the central control node for the neural weapons network. Even here, he's broadcasting lies, Zara said bitterly. The public won't know what's really happening. But they might, Jess replied, studying the chamber systems. Your father said this chamber connects to the planet's biosphere. Does that include the communication network? The Emperor nodded weakly. The ancestral memory system maintains connections to all Kaltorian information networks. In ancient times, it served as emergency broadcast system to unify our people during crisis. Can we access it? Show everyone what's really happening. Possible, the Emperor confirmed, but requires royal authentication and... He hesitated, looking at his daughter with sudden understanding. And sacrifice. Zara stepped forward without hesitation. What must be done, father? The chamber requires living royal consciousness to authenticate emergency broadcasts. Temporary neural integration. His temple gems flickered with concern. The process is painful. As Admiral Draz and his forces began systematically disabling the chamber's outer defenses, Zara made her decision. Begin the integration. The Emperor guided her to a crystalline structure at the chamber center. As Zora placed her hands upon it, tendrils of living circuitry extended to connect with her temple gems. Her body tensed with pain, but she maintained her position as her consciousness expanded into the ancestral memory system. Lieutenant Miller, the Emperor turned to Jess. While Zara attempts to reveal the truth, we must disable the neural weapons network. The control node Admiral Draz carries is the central hub. How can we get to it? Captain Reeves asked. The chamber will be breached within minutes. The Emperor's expression grew solemn. There is one option. Lieutenant Miller's neural patterns form the foundation of the weapons system. If she were to connect to the ancestral memory system alongside my daughter, she might create a disruptive resonance within the network. Another neural integration. Reeves objected. The risk to a human brain is mine to take. Jess interrupted, stepping forward. What do I need to do? As Draz's forces breached the outer defenses, Jess joined Zora at the crystalline interface. The moment her hands touched the living circuitry, pain unlike anything she'd experienced flooded her consciousness. Human neural architecture was never meant to integrate with Kaltorian biotechnology at this level. Through the haze of agony, Jess became aware of her consciousness expanding throughout the neural weapons network. She could feel the controlled soldiers, their individuality suppressed beneath programming based on her own thought patterns. And beyond them, she sensed Admiral Draz, his consciousness partially integrated with the control node. While Zara broadcast the truth of the coup throughout the Kaltorian communication network, Jess confronted the Admiral directly through the neural interface. Human unpredictability, challenging Kaltorian control systems on their own terms. Impossible, Draz's voice echoed through her consciousness. Human neural architecture cannot sustain direct integration. That's your problem. Admiral, Jess replied through gritted teeth. You keep underestimating what humans can endure for the right reasons. With that declaration, Lieutenant Jessica Miller made a decision that defied every algorithmic prediction about human behavior. Rather than attempting to seize control of the neural network, a logical approach that would have failed, she chose to release it entirely. She sent a cascading release command, dissolving the hierarchical control structure in favor of individual autonomy. Throughout the palace, controlled Kaltorians stumbled as their neural implants deactivated. The weapons Draz had spent years developing, based on the unpredictability of human thought, were undone by the most human choice of all, the willingness to relinquish power rather than wield it. As Jess collapsed from the neural strain, the last thing she witnessed was Admiral Draz's expression of disbelief as his own guards regained their autonomy and surrounded him. In the end, the advanced algorithm that had dismissed humanity as an evolutionary dead end had failed to account for their most distinctive quality, the capacity to choose connection over control.